Hello everybody, this is Niclas Huschenbeth, and in this video I would like to analyze my game against International Master Stephen Zierk. And this game was played just a few days ago in the Grandmaster Tournament in Charlotte. It was an invitational tournament at the Charlotte Chess Center, and I played there along with 8 other players. And it was quite a good tournament for me, so I decided to analyze 2 of my games, and this one my game against Stephen Zierk, and then in another video, which you can find in the description, my game against Michael Brown. So let's get right into it. I started out with e4 and he played c5, knight f3, d6, and here I decided to go for a quiet line bishop b5 check. Usually I play the open Sicilian, but I wasn't quite sure what he had prepared and I didn't really want to find out, so I decided to surprise him, to be the first to kind of deviate and play bishop b5 check. Knight d7, which is the most ambitious move here, and in fact Zierk, my opponent, needed to win this game to still have a chance to make a GM norm, so it makes a lot of sense for him to choose this move. d4, c takes d4, queen takes d4, now e5 was a little bit of a surprise to me. Usually people play a6 here, which kind of forced the exchange of the bishops, and then later black can decide to play either with e6 or e5. By playing with e5 immediately, black gives me the additional option in the future to keep my bishop, move it back to c4 to also take control of the d5 square, and this is actually what is going to happen in the game. Bishop e7, knight c3, and now a6. Bishop c4. I could have also taken and transposed to align this familiar to me, but I thought I could maybe make use of the fact that he has played e5 first. Not quite sure if this is any better, but a completely different kind of position. Knight gf6, h6 here to prevent bishop g5 doesn't quite work because of queen d5. Quite annoying for black. So knight gf6 here. I could have played bishop g5, and it's really all about control of the d5 square, but I went a4 instead to prevent any b5. Bishop g5 is certainly possible. I wasn't quite happy to give up this bishop on b3, but it's maybe also a little bit more comfortable for white. So I played a4, h6 now to prevent bishop g5, and now I said, okay, well, I'm going to fix the pawn structure on the queen side and not allow b6. Well, black can still play b6, but this is always better for white because there's a target now on a6, and this is usually not what black wants to do. So instead my opponent played knight c5, the queen retreats, and he played bishop e6. I said, okay, well, I'll castle for now. Now queen c7, and here I took on e6. I think already black might have this threat to play knight c takes e4, so I do have to react here. And my opponent surprised me by taking with the f pawn, which is very interesting. I was expecting knight takes e6, bishop e3, and if now castles, then I have a strong move here, knight h4, aiming to go for f5. Black can't really play g6 because the pawn on h6 is hanging, and knight takes e4 is the typical tactic, but with the queen on c7, I have knight d5 here, is quite strong. And also the other knight can come to f5 and black is in trouble. So instead f takes e6, and now I still play knight h4, aiming to go to g6 and also maybe having the option to go f4. And here he played g5, what I expected. If castle, then knight g6, rook f8, f4 looks quite attractive to me. The knight on g6 unpleasant, black really can't kick him out. f5 is a threat now to play on a light square. Probably black has to take, and maybe this isn't as bad, but it looks unpleasant, certainly for black. So g5, knight g6, rook g8, and knight takes e7, king takes e7. And it's quite an interesting position because on the one hand black's controlling a lot of squares. This e6 pawn is doing amazing work here, taking away these these squares on d5 and d5, so black has no problems there, and at the same time black also prevents any f4 break, obviously, by playing g5. But the black king is weak, and this is black's main problem. The king will not find any really safe spot in this position. And I took my time now to kind of figure out a plan. And I play king h1, which I think is fine. Just get this king out of the way, and probably have to play f3 at some point. Play king f7, but now f3 is a mistake, I would say, because I didn't consider his plan or his idea. I thought he can't really do that much. I was thinking maybe he's going to push his pawns here, but I wasn't too worried about that. But in fact, after f3 he played d5, which I dismissed because I thought black cannot open the center with the king right there, but it just works out pretty well for him, in fact. So here should prevent d5 playing rook d1, and now rook g8 to protect the e5 pawn in the future, and now f3, rook d8, and really it's all here about being prepared for a d5 break, because if now d5 I think can go something like b4 here, and this is why rook a3, a very strong prophylactic move to protect the knight on c3 once the knight moves, and here once again d5 would be hanging. So I think, I mean, this is my honest opinion about this position, is that if white is able to defend against d5 or make it impossible for black more or less, then white is in good shape, but still remains very difficult position because it's also not easy for white to improve. My original plan, if black just sits, was to bring the knight to c4 somehow, say knight d1, and then knight e3, b3, knight c4, something along these lines, because c4 seems to be a perfect square for the knight. But black doesn't just sit, but plays d5. So I took on d5, I didn't want him to close down the position with d4. E takes d5, and now rook e1, I'm not sure about. After a game we discussed knight d1 immediately to bring the knight to better squares. So rook e1, rook g8, here computer suggests h4, which is a move I didn't consider at all. Maybe that's possible, it's a little bit crazy, but maybe it's possible. I played a rather normal move, bishop d2, rook ac8, and now knight d1. Bringing my knight to better squares. Knight was really not doing all that much on c3. Knight e6, knight e3, knight f4, and queen f1. And now it's slowly heating up a little bit here. Getting very interesting. Here my opponent spent a lot of time, and we're both already kind of short on time, and it was the time control was 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment per move, so not a lot of time. Here my opponent played king g6 to take away the f5 square. Instead, I was expecting d4. Now knight f5, and here black has two options, king g6 or queen d7. King g6, now I take on f4, black cannot take on f5 because of queen d3 check, that would mean trouble for black. But g takes f4, and now g4. So knight h4 is another move, but g4 is interesting here. F takes g3 and simply queen h3. Once again, very complicated, but it seems white has good chances here. The other move that I looked at in this position is queen d7. If now g4, then black can play h5 very strong. And this seems to be quite good for black. So maybe knight takes h6 instead, and then knight g4, knight takes, f takes, queen takes g4, bishop takes f4, g takes f4, queen d3 check. I'm not sure about this position. I'm able to stop these pawns rolling forward by putting my rook on e4 in the worst case, but on the other hand it's also not easy for me to become active really. It seems black should be preferred in this position. Alright, but my opponent didn't want to commit here to d4 and played king g6, and I was quite happy to find this move b3, because this really takes this d4 threat out of the position, because now I can play knight c4, and I'm very happy with my knight on c4 protected, and seems quite fine for me. So queen c6, good move to kind of prepare e4 break in the future already, put the queen on a better square. Now I played g3, kick the knight out, and I play queen h3. Maybe just rook d1 here, because queen h3 I'm not sure about. Maybe just rook d1 here instead would be better. Queen h3, obviously I'm trying to come in here. He plays knight g7. Actually the more active move knight d4 would have been possible and would have given black the advantage. Let's say c3, and now queen e6 the important move to cover f5, and then black can even take on b3 in the next move if my queen moves, and if I exchange queens, then black's also more comfortable in this endgame. Knight g7, now I move back to g2, and now king h7. Instead he could have played e4 right away here. And this once again gives black probably a slight advantage. F takes e4, knight takes e4, and now c4 is possible. After knight takes d2, I have to move knight takes d5. And this knight cannot be saved, because after knight takes b3, I have queen c2, and pick up the knight. So instead black should play d takes c4, knight takes c4, knight f5. Still position remains complicated, of course. A lot going on it, and on the one hand black has a strong knight on e4, but on the other hand his king is still weak. Difficult, remains complicated. Okay, my opponent played safely, played king h7, but now I play rook d1, and now e4. F takes e4. If now knight takes e4, I can just move my bishop to b4. And this should be fine for me. So he took with the rook. And now I played c4. Because I somehow have to move my knight from e3. It's not feeling quite stable. Black has threats with d4 and all these things, so I felt like c4 was a good choice here. D takes c4, knight takes c4, and rook c8. And the position is symmetrical, but there's still some play here, especially because I have the bishop and his king is weak. This bishop is quite strong now on the long diagonal. He was thinking of bishop c3, but in the worst case, black could exchange everything on e1, probably is fine. So I found this move bishop f1, which I was happy to find. The point is that black now cannot move the rook really, except for to e6 because of the rook e2. In the end, the knight on f6 is hanging. So instead, my opponent played knight d5, and now bishop c1. Just aiming to get the bishop on a long diagonal. And the position is not easy for black to play, especially in time trouble. We're both fairly low on time now. Played rook 8 to e6, which is fine. In the post-mortem analysis we looked at queen e6, and then bishop b2, rook e2, and here not queen takes d5, that would lose for white after queen h3. But instead rook f2, and white is still keeping the advantage here, keeping slight pressure. So rook 8 e6, bishop b2, and now king g8 is a mistake. Instead, black has some options here. Maybe knight e7, simply going back here. defending against rook f7 now because of rook e1. It seems to me that this knight should move, because right now this rook is kind of pinned. If the rook moves, the knight hangs on d5. Knight e3 would be another move. But here also, white is maybe still having a little advantage. Still, this bishop is quite strong. But after king g8, I can play queen f3, threatening queen f7 or queen f8, obviously, and giving checkmate. Here black still had a miraculous defense. And in fact, if you want to, you can try to figure this out yourself right now. So let me switch the board. Stop the video right here. How can black still defend against these threats queen f7 and queen f8 in a decent way? Alright, I will proceed now. Let me turn the board again. Knight f5 would be the saving move. Difficult to find. I didn't see it and he didn't see this. He didn't consider this move either. Point is, after queen takes f5 now, this diagonal is open and black can play rook f4. Crazy. Crazy. And white has to give the queen here. I mean, g takes f4, knight takes... Hold on, knight takes f4? No, knight e3 is probably the way to go. And if king g1, queen g2, checkmate, and if rook d5, then knight takes f5. And white appears to be in trouble here. So queen takes e6, queen takes e6, g takes f4, queen e4 check, king g1, knight takes f4. White has two rooks and a bishop, but black is threatening stuff, and probably white has to give back more material to... Probably rook takes f4 is necessary here. And white is only better a little bit. So instead, after knight f5, white probably should play king g1, which is not an easy move to play, but it makes sense to get out of this diagonal, and white is having good chances here. But this remains still highly complicated, whereas in the game after king h7 it's now very simple for me. I just take on g7, king takes, and now the queen comes in, giving a couple of checks, and more checks, and another check, g4, there's rook, queen f5, checkmate, so rook g4, and queen f7, check, and here my opponent resigned. Only move is rook g6, but I can just take everything on g6, and then take even the rook first, and then take the knight. It's just all over. Alright, quite a complicated position with an unusual pawn structure in the game. These pawns on double pawns on the e-file, and black had a lot of control by playing g5. At the same time, what actually in the end more or less led to his defeat was the weak king, which was always like something black had to watch out for. But very interesting indeed. In the end, it was really decided by the time scramble, when really it's so easy to go wrong, and because I had a little bit more pressure, it was easier for black to go wrong, and this played into my favor in this case. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.